done lately? It's Coons. What have y'all done for us lately? And if there's no answer, the only thing we owe them.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk 2. And tonight we'll just say we're going off the path a little bit to have a conversation with someone who has a very unique experience. And she'll explain her experience, but we're gonna have a conversation in reference to the ICE raids that are going on in Los Angeles County. Uh, We see it all over the news. The president has issued the National Guard to be there, as well as he has deployed 700 Marines. He's getting pushback from the Los Angeles mayor, who does not have no authority over Los Angeles County. And he's also getting pushback from the present governor, Gavin Newsom. Uh, Sister Azima, for those who don't know, she will give us some background. One of the things that we need to understand, if you've ever been a part or have been in a protest, usually when you're in a protest, they fairly go well, unless it's a big protest and a big situation that people are protesting about. Then you have a lot, whether it's something we protest that may be beneficial to melanated people or not. You will always have an opposite uh, protesting the protesters. And also, you'll always have agitators, outside agitators. Sister Azima, for those of you that don't know, she is from St. Louis, uh, home of where Mike Brown situation happened, and literally not even just St. Louis, but literally Ferguson, the area, like the footsteps at where she used to live. She could look out the window. Unfortunately, where Mike Brown basically lost his life. So she has seen how a protest starts off as the community protesting about the injustices within their community, and then national spotlight come, and then it get hijacked. So it is imperative that we have this conversation, and she will give us some insight of how this happens, why this happens, what's going on in Los Angeles, and should melanated people really care, or should we be involved with what's going on? Um, I know a lot of us feel as though, like, that's them people. They illegal. They don't, shouldn't be here. Whatever happens to them happens to them. Be that as it may, but be that as it may, Sister Azima is gonna have a conversation with us in reference to what she sees going on. Uh, Good evening.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. How's everyone doing? Is everybody tired like we all are? And I guess you're wondering why you're so tired. There's a
Yeah,
lot going on in the universe. When I say the universe, I mean our galaxy, our solar system. We lost a star. It's a lot that's going on. All of those changes um, at the macro level does
hmm
directly affect us down here. And now we're going to move to this. Remember when I talked to you all in the very beginning that there are 7 pillars that make a society. Remember, we said family, religion, education, government, culture, economics. Okay. Those key things is what structures a society. And when you have those, and they're rooted on what we talked about, natural law, divine law, the principles of Ma'at, and the law of peace that the indigenous people hear, um, the same law of peace that you would see in Australia and New Guinea and New Zealand among melanated people, then your society can flourish. It will stand the test of time. What we have seen through history is that every 500 years, there is a major change that goes on in the social structure of European societies. And we would see that. You know, you had Attila the Hun, you had um, Vlad the Impaler, you had the whole thing with Caesar, when Cleopatra, which is a title for a female pharaoh, she was a mixture of Greek and North African lineage. When you would see that, then you would see where societies would literally fall apart and they would have to recoalesce. They would not recoalesce under what I consider a family structure, but they would come back together under a church system. And the church system began to rule how you looked at things and determined what was going on. Had to say that because you need to understand that in the 60s, when, because I was a participant in the 60s, when we were quietly marching and protesting and sitting in, violence was always there for us. It was never anything new. You know, you would have the dogs, we would have the water hoses on us. They would spit on you, they would spit in the food if you were sitting at the diner counter. We have always experienced that type of disrespect and disregard. But now you're getting to see it on a different level. It's not even about us anymore. It's about the fact that after Nixon, we began to hear openly NWO. And we don't mean Iggers with an attitude, okay? It's New World Order. They had created an agenda called Agenda 21. And then they coupled it with Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood. In that New World Order piece, and if you remember, I always told you that frequency was important, that you are a frequency vibrating entity. And I think a lot of times you disregard that. But politicians use all the stuff I tell you. When I tell you that they know what their frequency is, they know when to manipulate it, they know how to go about doing what they have to do. And everything you see around you is not by happenstance, it's been pre planned. And it was pre planned 20, 30, sometimes 500 years ago, because they knew that whatever they laid down, their children would be the predecessors. They would be the ones that would benefit in the long term, and they could still maintain control. The purpose of the New World Order was to have one government, one ideology, okay, one system that if you did not adhere to that system, you could be cut off. You would have no food, no water, no access to anything. Knowing that, New World Order became the mantra for the Bush administration, the Clinton administration. Obama said it in his speeches, when they would have the um, White House opening address. They would always talk about us being in a New World Order. They're going to tell you that 8 billion people on this planet is too many people. And that is not true. You can drive a lot of places and don't see cities. The only place you see congestion are around commercial areas, and that would be your cities or your ports of trade and commerce. So, but once you get away from that, there's a lot of urban and there's a lot of rural and sub-rural areas, that suburban areas that you don't see that type of mayhem going on. You just don't see it. So, with that, you will hear dispersed intermittently throughout all of this George Soros. Please go and look him up. His purpose is to be disruptive. He pays students, political science students. Hear me. George Soros will go out and he has a demographic that he's looking for. And if that student, doesn't matter if they're white, East Indian, American Indian, Australian, Arab, Black, doesn't matter. If they fit within the demographics that he's looking for, then he finds a way to pay their tuition as long as they're studying political science, constitutional law, criminal law, okay? Not tort law, which deals with business, but everything else that deals with the social structure in which they can contain or control. So, what do? You create dissension within your social structure, within society. The key places you're going to do it will be where you elect people, your politicians. It's always in politics. Okay. Remember, this is a business. And when you step back and look at the United States of America as a business, you will see things known as the Trojan horse, the white horse, the gray horse. And these terminologies are the types of companies that will come in and take over. So George Soros has these students. These students are in school. One of the things they're required to do, and if you're not a grant writer and you do become a grant writer and you're working with schools or colleges, universities, whatever, when students are in school, even if you work with trade schools, they have to do something called practicum hours, which means they have to go out and use the skills that they learned in the classroom, apply them in society. So if you were in a trade school, they still have to build a car or make a house or whatever, do the plumbing and the electrical work. If you are in a university or a college, then you're going to have to go out, especially when it deals with social work and anything that deals with political science. They have to go out into society and bring what they've learned to the class from the classroom into the real world. So these people became known as Antifa. Our first experience, my first experience, and my family's first experience with Antifa was when Mike Brown. Never saw these people, never saw these white people in my life. Young.
Before you finish,
Mhm.
um, I need you to explain prior to Mike Brown what was going on in Ferguson, St. Louis, that area, in reference to the policing and understanding that the original BLM, so to say, the original people who were there, like yourself, um,
Well, we were
what
already,
was the climate? What was the climate like? And then prior to outside agitators coming.
our climate here, we were about to become sanctioned under Eric Holder. Um, Missouri was a borderline slave state. Dred Scott case came through here. The end result was that he could not acquire his freedom, and they put him still as a slave. Our police department for the city of St. Louis, which at the time of the Civil War were soldiers. They didn't have like a sheriff or they didn't have the sheriff in place. They used the soldiers. The soldiers were under the control of the governor, the state. The city of St. Louis, which at one time was 60% Black, but a lot of people have moved out. Industry is no longer here. So all these other circumstances that impact things, people move, they migrate because they're going to follow work. Um, we were fighting tooth and nail to have control of our police department. And once we got control of the police department, the unnecessary headaches really began to surface. The tension, the internal tension between Black and white officers, even between Black and white fire department captains and chiefs, it was, how can I put it? The oligarchy. The oligarchy is the established people that are here in any city. They usually tend to be the very wealthy people of your city, your town, your state. They have the ability to influence what goes on. Many of them have the ability to sit on the electoral college board because they have the money. And then they say, well, they'll just determine Missouri gets 11 electoral votes. They can say that the very wealthy will hold 4 or 5 of those positions. The remaining positions can be filtered out among people who think like them, but they don't necessarily have to be the wealthy. But they pretty much like their guidelines. They'll follow their guidelines. St. Louis was like that. It was very bad here, so much so that the ACLU and several other organizations and agencies wrote to the Supreme Court, and told them this. The Department of Justice has said this is what's going on. It's crazy. You got to do something. Eric Holder came here, met with them. Quite a few others came, and they realized we had a serious problem. So the bottom line was that they put us under that sanction for 25 years. We had to work on some things. We went from having a police system that was run by the government, by the state, to it being run by the city. We also went from having people, police officers, holding their position as a patronage job. I went out and voted for you. I got people out here. I rallied for you. And it moved from that. Then it moved into them trying to find a better means of continuing to subjugate a class of people they had in mind. They also, because I had family members that were police officers, they told me part of their training was that, how can I put this? Police officers would have to speak loud because we didn't have body cameras, but they'd have to say it loud enough for anybody passing by. I fear for my life. You are a danger to me. I have to take care of this. Okay. And that would allow them to just openly abuse, batter, and kill. Once they realized that they were under sanction, and not just St. Louis police, but the entire police department for the state of Missouri, all police department, they began to send their policemen to school. That was the requirement. They had to go to school. They had to learn criminal law, constitutional law. It didn't change the bad actors. They just came out knowing how to circumvent the law if they needed to. But it did allow a lot more of them to be arrested and serve time in jail. Moving to Mike Brown. Where I was living, walk out my back and look down into the apartment complex where he was murdered. The people at the marketplace that they talked about were customers of Mike Brown. Okay. They would get their product from him, and they in turn could, because a lot of people came in and out, they in turn could sell that product as well. Out in the suburbs, especially in Ferguson, unless you're on the main street, like in many suburban areas, sidewalks are only on your main thoroughfares. But often the residential areas, there's no sidewalk. The streets are wide enough for you to walk, but there's no sidewalk. Wasn't a sidewalk out here. As things were occurring, Darren, Officer Wilson, was already out on a call, not even related to Mike Brown. There had been some type of medical emergency. He was there. It was a requirement. If they ran up into a situation, it was a requirement that you have a police officer there in case they have to uh, break in and pronounce someone deceased. I don't know all of the ins and outs of that, but you have to have a police officer present. He was there. He left that scene, ambulance left, and then the incident occurred with Mike Brown. My opinion, Officer Wilson wasn't in a charitable mood that day. And I think Mike Brown became the butt end of bad choices, bad decisions, and a bad attitude. What we do know is that when all this went down and the young man was killed, just doors from where he lived in the Canfield Green complex, they let him lay in that hot sun for 5 hours.
Mm.
A unmarked black police car rolled up and they put Darren Wilson in there. Part of the protocol is to have a commanding officer come. I'm going by, my brother was a police officer and cousins. They were of rank, and my brother also ended up being a deputy. They are supposed to bag his hands so they can go in and swab him down for gun residue. They are to remove his weapon. They are to take his badge, go in and interrogate him, do the whole 9 yards, and get a statement. We did not have body cams at that time. Most people know that. That was a result of these urban deaths that the body cams came along. As residents, and you're angry, we began to mobilize. Now, let me tell you this. That strip of Ferguson where this incident occurred was just 4 blocks away from 2 other townships, Dalewood and part of Hazelwood, Blackjack. There were a lot of little townships around. When you're looking at that video up and down West Florissant, once you got, at that time it was Quick Trip, once you got past Quick Trip, you were in Dalewood. So there was a very small area that belonged to Ferguson on that part of the town.
So it's a just to understand when you say that, because I have an idea in my head. When you going on that strip, there's a potential that you'll see different municipalities of police.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
In the Dalewood area, wouldn't you know it, most of the people there are retired. Great little town. They are retired police, retired military. The police chief went, because at that time I had already retired and I was working from home, because remote working from home was new, but I had it down pat and I was enjoying it. He requested what they do for military situations. His tactical move was that they came in and put up concrete barriers around the area that we lived. Now, let me see if I can. Camfield Green is surrounded by 3 other apartment complexes. Right up the hill from them are nothing but residential areas. Those residential areas are mostly dead end because it's calm and quiet. There are a lot of children up there. Kids can play in the streets. You don't have to worry about cars flying through there because it's dead end. Everybody knows it's a dead end. You're not going anywhere. So they came under the guise of this chief of police, which they got rid of him right away. They put up the concrete barricades that you see on the highway to divide the highway. We only have one way in and one way out. It was hard for people who were at home and receiving hospice care to even get hospice care because your name wasn't on the list.
So this officer, this chief, decided to do this under his own authority to combat the unrest by the local residents.
Correct. Okay. All we were doing was walking up and down West Florissant, with our mantra, Black Lives Matter. We were not trying to, we wanted the right type of political attention to make a change. We were not looking for this other piece. So I know I'm jumping over a lot, but I don't want any strikes against you for me stating certain things. And I know
I don't think you're saying anything wrong. I think that you're giving and it's very important, you guys in the chat, that Sister Azima is giving us the context of an organic protest and understanding what happens when protests start organically, and then what happens is, as we know, national attention comes, which as a protester, you want national attention to come when you want quote unquote justice. However, with the national attention that comes is outside agitation, outside forces, people that have wanted things to fester and spiral out of control. And in the first portion of the show, Sister Azima explained who George Soros was, and it's imperative that we understand that he started a society called the Open Society, and what that meant, and what he meant, and what other countries viewed his agenda. What other countries and government viewed his agenda. So
Okay.
It's important for us to understand why she's giving this context on everything.
Mhm. So as we move forward with that, we were organically, um, we had staging areas. When I would drive down, there was two major cross streets, West Florissant and Jennings Station Road. I'd have to go down Jennings Station Road to get back up into my house. They had checkpoints there. I was like, what? He asked them to remove the mailboxes because we had mailboxes in residential areas. They came and moved the mailboxes, put up barricades. It was very hard to get in and out of certain areas. I mean, when you're living in areas like this, in these big residential areas, you have these nice cul-de-sacs up in there, but then you also have streets that connect with each other and get you out to your main road. And you would have four ways to get out to the main streets and not just one. And he had them come in and put these barricades up. It was crazy because you're driving around and you run into this concrete barricade. You wouldn't see mailboxes. He had requested through some type of authoritative order to have internet shut down. Temporarily it was. Then I lost my job working remote. We also were faced, he was requesting to have electricity turned off and water turned off. The same stuff you do as a military tactic. People in Delwood began to meet with us. We were just organically coming together, looking at the history of what the Black Panthers did, all this kind of stuff, how we can have what we call dominant but peaceful protest. All of a sudden, we began to get the peacekeepers. Look them up and see who they are. They were showing up on the rooftops of buildings because that chief of police had his people up there along with the SWAT teams. He was calling in police from everywhere. He was expecting 1,000 people to just break down and riot so that he could justify a mass killing. Think about that. So they had their dogs out. And this is when we coalesced as people. Your gang folks had their dogs, and they were pit bulls. They were trained. They would be in the front, on the front line. Their German shepherds and Malinois backed down. It became a standoff. That's not what we were after. We would only be out here. We would pick times of the day. Hear me out. We're planning this. There was a McDonald's close to the Ferguson market. It was right across the little walkway. Ferguson market here, walkway over here, across the street and down the street was Canfield Green. But in front of Canfield Green were nothing but residences. So the gang situation, and I hate to say gang, but I'm gonna say misguided. They're highly misguided in the respect that they feel that this is their only option. Thank you, Miss Tina. They don't feel that they have an option, and they do. They really do. What it showed me was that they were willing to put themselves on the line, not all of them, but some of them, and they would walk with us with their pit bulls. They would make sure that they could be in the front so the dogs don't charge back to us. We began to get everything we needed. We created our own tear gas masks. We got our own Kevlar. We were prepared. Okay. We would have peaceful demonstrations at certain times. On certain days of the week, we would go early. Then we would go afternoon, and then we would go in the evening with torches so you can see what's going on. After the third week in, that's when we began to get all this stuff. Well, so much was happening all over America in little enclaves, other cities, and things like that. And they were talking with the St. Louis chapter, see how we get this together, what we're doing, what we're going to call ourselves. We didn't really have a name, but we were just stating that Black lives do matter. Because historically, we have seen from slavery through Jim Crow laws, lynch laws, through during the times of the 40s, we were always standing up and protecting and fighting this country, but never got our just rewards.
Historically, because of what happened during in the time of East St. Louis, most of the people there are like descendants of those riots. I won't call them riots. I'll call them massacres.
Right.
Like that's what they
Because
were.
it wasn't just East St. Louis. You had it in Rosewood. You had it in Tulsa. I remember when our government had the airplanes fly over the houses in Detroit and firebomb the neighborhood. Yeah, I remember that. I also remember when our government would, our government, the government of the corporation would create a lot of dissension and tension between unionized Black folks and unionized white people, that they would fight among themselves. But the most interesting thing is that before the peacekeepers came, we would see young, college bound, upwardly mobile white kids show up in Black clothing with, you could tell that they had breastplates underneath. You would see their pants were tight against their legs and laced. The boots were steel-toed boots with a very thick insole. They came with a baton that they could collapse and put it on their hip. They had their gloves on. They could blend in, but then they would put their fire retardant over their face and then put their helmet on. We started seeing pallets of bricks showing up on the streets where we were protesting. And me and my family would sit down and talk. We started talking with everyone we knew. We were telling everybody, don't touch them. We went out of our way to buy glue to make sure they couldn't pick this up and throw, because that was part of their tactic. The Antifa group, they're following how to disrupt society.
So when you guys started seeing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you would see these agitators come and try to and I need to everybody that has in the chat, if you guys have ever been a part of a protest, you will have 4 or 5 speakers throughout the day
Mm-hmm.
that will do the chant like they were saying, Black Lives Matter, so forth, so on, and that was not an organization at the time. And you guys would talk, and then certain people within the community would talk, will talk and explain what happened and go over why justice is being served, why Darren Wilson need to be brought to justice,
Mm-hmm.
so forth, so on. So
Mm-hmm.
when you started seeing these people, because what happens in crowd control, you would always see them spread out. You would probably see one and be like, "Oh, I just saw you on the other side of the protest," and not realize it may be 25, 30.
Mm-hmm.
So when you guys started seeing these pallets of bricks,
Mm-hmm.
and you guys didn't bring them there.
No.
The law enforcement didn't bring them there. It's like,
Mm-mm.
what, what's the purpose of the bricks? Nobody. It's not. You guys are not protesting to destroy your own community.
We took pictures. At that time, everybody was using their cell phone. We were photographing them. We were taking it to the police who didn't want to be bothered at all. They themselves didn't know how the bricks got there. And instead of de escalating it, their chief of police escalated it because he wanted to make it a race war. Inadvertently, that's what it would have been. It would have been white people against black people. And instead of him saying, let's just follow the policies and procedures and protocols, they whisked it away. When you hear him talk on television, he says, Mike Brown was selling drugs. He was doing this, he was doing that. He went up there to the Ferguson market and escalated it. And the people in the Ferguson market never called the police. Darren Wilson was coming away from a call he had already been on. I don't know what beef he had with the brother. I can't speak on that. But I know he immediately picked him out of the crowd and decided, well, it's going to be my lucky day. And it didn't turn out to be a lucky day for him at all.
So for context, does Chief feel as though people in this particular area are upset? It's unrest, so to say. So by having these concrete barriers, what he did is that he isolated this particular area,
Mm-hmm.
and outside agitators as well as authentic protesters were in this small area and basically guarded. In this area was guarded with police, law enforcement, because
Yes.
they wasn't letting nobody in or out. Definitely by car. We already know
Yeah,
that you can't.
but here's the other thing. It wasn't like that all day long.
Hmm,
Okay. Because we
okay.
didn't protest from sun up to sundown. We had certain days that we were going to protest. And on those days, we decided, well, we're going to protest over here in front of the police department. Next time, we're going to protest on West Floors. The next time, we're going to go down and protest in the city because at that time, there had been 2 other murders, same situation in the city. Which leads me to this whole thing with the FBI. Because the FBI had some people undercover, and the St. Louis police officers hurt that black man, hurt him badly. He cannot work today, but he's suing the city of St. Louis.
And in the process, all this time,
Mm-hmm.
the city police,
Mm-hmm.
county police,
Mm-hmm.
state police is all under what we call monitored by the federal government under Eric Holder, who was Attorney General at the time.
Yeah, but he had already put them. He was developing the sanction, the 25-year sanction. Okay. Now, thank God, our governor had a cooler head. He immediately said, turn the power back on, turn the water on. We're not doing this. We're not under military anything. No, we don't do this to our citizens. We began to see a lot more of the, you got your good lawyers and you got your bad lawyers, but everybody was showing up to get their piece of the pie. There were some results that has not been released to the general public that I am aware of and cannot speak on it without the family's permission. So I cannot speak on that. But when you start seeing white trucks with the lift gate pulling up and dropping off pallets of things like stones and rocks, and they had these little balls that had spikes on them, I'm like, Peacekeepers came. Then we began to see a lot of other white people that stood with us, marching alongside. of us, giving us protection because we were photographing it. The news media wasn't going to show you, but sometimes these other camera people and news reporters from other cities and states was saying, look at this, what is this, where did that come from, what's that here for, and we could show
Shout out
that
to
this is
independent media,
unnecessary.
independent media. And when you look at that situation that happened, that you were in the part of the genesis of it, independent media has become a major staple in our country. And it is very important that independent media continues doing what they're doing, um, without fear or flight.
Mhm.
Uh, and if you have an opportunity, this is just a reminder for those in the chat, support people that are into doing independent media, because it truly is hard. They are on the front line. Most of the people are spending their personal money, going broke, trying to report and not be funded by organizations, groups, special interest.
Mhm.
Uh, and this is important. And we all know, not to minimize what Sister Azima is explaining, but we all need to understand how significant this situation in Ferguson that took place 11 years ago, how and understand the genesis of a protest and why we're speaking about it today and understanding what's going on in California, how uh, it wasn't a murder that took place, but when you protest and how you see, even in the picture in the background, when you see people burning stuff, uh, law enforcement shooting people with rubber bullets, even media with rubber bullets, how all this happens.
Mhm.
Uh, you have different authorities that have control. In speaking about the ones in LA, we have to understand that LA is not only a town, but it's also a county, Los Angeles County.
Mhm.
So I saw myself two different reports where California Highway Patrol is there. California Highway Patrol is there, and they have used rubber bullets on two different independent journalists. One not independent, one independent, one wasn't independent.
Mhm.
And some of the politicians that are there are upset with the president for sending the National Guard there, saying it's not needed, saying blaming the president
Mhm.
for the agitation. Um,
Can I speak on that too?
yes, yes.
We're gonna move to Los Angeles, but it's happening in Chicago as well. George Soros' Open Society, and the fact that he was willing to fund these people. These students are required to be political science students. They must learn constitutional law, criminal law, um, and they have to do practicum hours, which means they have to give up their time. They can also be social workers because that's the backbone of creating societies and social structures. Um, what he did, and everybody said he ran being Black Lives Matter. He didn't, because we were never organized to a point where he could come in and take over an organization. We were highly organic. We knew how to come together and have strategic planning. We had, just like them, we had staging grounds. All of our protests was confined to a 5 block area. The Molotov cocktails were over there in front of the police department before we even got there, sitting in strategic places that we wouldn't even know was there. The Antifa people knew. And what does that do? It creates what image? And that's what they're after, because under the New World Order, you have to reduce the population from 8 billion to 500 million. Did you hear me? From 8 billion to 500 million. If you want to control the earth and all the people on it in the New World Order and under Project 21, or rather Agenda 21, You have to go in and see, read Margaret Sanger, her whole Planned Parenthood people. All of this was under eugenics. And she was a great proponent of that. So were the people that ran the Nazi Party in Germany. Hitler lost control. I'm not saying he's a good guy, but he lost control. And all the people under him, Stalin and all of them under him, were like, we got this. We're going to run with this. This is our opportunity. And that's the problem. When you want to tear a society down, you create those, you seize on the moments of great opportunity. You
Say it
help,
again. Say it again.
you seize the moment of great opportunities when you want to tear a society down. It didn't happen. That was the whole purpose of this piece. The police departments were feeling themselves because they had been in a lot of court battles. They lost a lot of court battles, and they wouldn't tell you that. Many officers lost their jobs and went to jail. Now they got to be in jail. So they can't put them in mass population. They got to put them in isolation. That doesn't look good. Cities are having to pay 10, 12, that's why they're in debt. They're paying out for the failure of the police to do what they were supposed to do. And that's when they began to demand under uh, the fact that the cities were sanctioned that they would have to have their police trained because they weren't. They were patronage job. Bob owed you a favor. Mike's son needed a job. We're going to put him on the police force. We'll teach him how to shoot a gun. But they didn't know any laws. And so now you realize you have to send them to school to learn the law. And that whole mindset causes them to break down and be angry. When they didn't get the oligarchy, the establishment, the whole New World Order people under George Soros, and he's not the only one, there's some other folks. When they didn't get the results they wanted by killing off the young African American men and women, they didn't get the race war that they wanted. That's what they were gearing up for. This police chief didn't know that's what they were gearing up for. He had allowed his own bias and prejudices lead him down a path where he lost his job, got sued. Okay. Everybody that was involved in it, not just the police, but the city council, all of them, they got sued. They got sued. And they lost a lot. So, in all of that, you're a small town, you don't have hundreds of millions of dollars to pay these families that you've hurt. So you got sued. These people lost their homes, they lost their jobs, whatever. They got sued. They've changed the chief of police 3 times. They're doing better. The problem is that a lot of them still have the old boy mentality. Now the new police officers are coming in, they don't have that mentality, which I'm very happy for. They're like, you wrong, dude. We gotta get you off the street. We gotta do something with you. Got to get you off the street. And police officers are realizing that now they can go to jail. Judges are now realizing they can go to jail. Remember, they are practicing the old system. And if you step back and look, the riot that was in Minnesota, that's a blue state. The stuff that's going on in Chicago is a blue state. California is a blue state. So what you're seeing is that these 13, 14, I think it's a total of 16 states, the blue states. They are trying to secede from the larger body of the United States of America. And they're doing all these little tactics.
Let me ask you, right? Because I truly understand exactly what you mean when you say that. For the person that may be new to the channel or may get a glimpse of what you're saying, and be like, what do you mean the blue states, those particular states, are trying to succeed from the union? Basically, that's what you're saying. They'd be like, what do you mean? They always talk about this democracy, this, that, and the third. Why would they do that? When you speak about George Soros and not just having and weaponizing Antifa, what do you mean when you talk about like with George Soros? Not only does he does stuff with Antifa, he does a lot of stuff far as with politicians and paying for their campaigns. And what we will say is weaponizing people
Yeah, he's
to
always done that.
to basically fulfill his agenda.
Hmm. And his agenda is to have social disruption. And that goes back to many of the movies that came out. You know, Mad Max over the Superdome and all of these movies here. What does it show you? It shows you a dystopic society, a society that can no longer function. And since it can't function, everybody is wild and crazy, and you can't go out in the street. What was that movie Purge? You know, remember that movie Purge? You have one day out of the year where you could openly have people come out and kill you. That is the way they think. Now I'm gonna walk you backwards.
Suggestive programming now.
Okay, I'm gonna adjust your programming and walk you backwards. Before you even came in contact with the white man. Remember, these are criminals, like we talked about. The criminals that came here, the white people that came here from Europe were mostly criminals. What were we doing before they got here? You can't say we were running around scalping folks and cannibalizing them and all this kind of stuff. Cannibalism was here, but you have to study the cannibalism. Okay. And the reason I say that is because the cannibalism that existed, they didn't go out and eat you, me, Joe Blow. What they did was that they would dig up their deceased, and on the day to honor them, they would have 1 day or 2 days out of the year in which they honored them. They would take their hair or a part of their skin or something, and they would blend it into some food that they would put to the side on an altar to always remember them. And then they would rebury them in the place where they had to be. They are cannibalizing. It's like you have two cars, you're going to cannibalize this car and put the parts over here on this car because it'll work because you're going to get one car working. And that's what they were doing. The other type of cannibalism is where they were really eating each other. Okay, but that was anybody they came in contact with. So what we were seeing is that democracy means to be ruled by the majority. Look that up. Democracy means to be ruled by the majority. The Democratic Party had black people in their hip pocket. Anytime they want a president to be elected, who do they come to? They'll tell you all the time, we don't need your vote. But when it comes to a president, they're going to come to you. Why? Because we're the only ones that vote in a block at one time. We are known as block voters. We will vote 100% for Mary Smith, and she will get in office. They wanted us to vote 100% for Kamala Harris. Kamala was not qualified to be president. She wasn't qualified to be the district attorney in San Francisco. Look at her record. She wasn't qualified.
So let me ask you, because I know that when did, because we see all this stuff with immigration and understanding that former President Obama was basically, his nickname was the deporter in chief, where he deported more people than any other president in history, even up until this day. When did the shift or the policy change happened for the Democratic Party where they were pro illegal, open borders, letting everybody in, don't care. When did that shift happen and why did it happen? I know that we could talk about where basically Soros and his agenda, that was the major shift. But when did that shift actually happen? Because just as recent as, like I
NAMLR.
said,
NAMLR. You know what NAMLR is? The North
yeah,
American Brother Love, Man Love Association. They stepped into the pool. Now, I'm going to tell you something you all are not going to believe, but the trafficking of children, America's number one. We traffic more children here as sex slaves and labor slaves. America's number one. I don't want to be number one for trafficking children or anybody, but we are number one. And it was because of NAMBLR. And NAMBLR is who's giving you transgender stuff and all this stuff. Because in the homosexual community, their mind is not thinking on this stuff. We see this transgender stuff and I'm something binary and, you know, today I'm this, tomorrow I'm something else. They're not doing that. But NAMBLR is. They are fighting for a law to allow them to have children make decisions as early as age 4 on sexual love. What does a 4-year-old know? And there have been a lot of children that were adopted out of foster care into these people who believe and practice that NAMBLR thing. And they had transgendered and now they're coming back going by, I've damaged myself. I can never be a man again. I was born male. I can never be a full female again. I was born female. They've damaged themselves and they will be sick. Okay. The minute Trump cut that money through the United States Agency of International Development, USAID, which most of the money went into, and when I say most of the money, that's your tax dollar. It upsets me because I'm retired. And that money that you take from me that I can't give back went to them. And George Soros and his folks putting bricks out here and these little mace balls and all this kind of stuff. Why? And most of that was done in the communities or states that were dominated by the Democratic Party.
so when we see civil quote unquote, and and I need to be very careful what I want to say because everybody under our constitution, under the Constitution,
Mhm.
you have a right to protest. So when you see this, what we would say is civil unrest, and you see cars getting burnt, law enforcement cars getting burnt, um, American flags getting burnt, people throwing stuff at law enforcement. And then you see the elected officials saying they don't need any assistance and they only need assistance when they call. How do you view that? Because it's okay, yeah, you have to call and ask the federal government for assistance in those circumstances. And you see that the president is sitting in a seat where his people, strategists, are saying before it gets out of hand, we need to go there and contain the situation.
Okay,
How
so
do
let me
you
speak on
go
something
ahead.
separate. When Johnson requested the National Guard, it was because the governor of the state would not send the National Guard to protect us when we went to school down south. That's the only time the president can intervene. Who's the governor of California? Gavin
Gavin
Newsom.
Newsom.
He's not going to call them in. And the protest is really getting out of hand. And so, I mean, just let me back up with something. We know that California has a high homelessness rate. before Newsom even became governor. There was this, I don't know the man's name, they never put the name up, but here was a gentleman who once a month had saved up $1,200 and he was building tiny homes. And he put these tiny homes out there where they got all these tents out and the people who are living on the street and they're defecating on the street. I remember reading where this gentleman uh, got permission to have a vacant parking lot. I may not have it right, but he did get permission to put these tiny homes on this vacant parking lot. It was a parking lot. It was attached to some type of building no longer standing, but he somehow got permission, or maybe he didn't. But he put about 16 tiny homes on there. It was only big enough for you to go in, eat, it had a little space where you could cook, you off the street. You could have an address with a mailbox so you could get, the services that you needed. And it allowed him to put up or had a way to have I want to call them like outdoor showers, but they were closed in. And they could get up, go have a shower. People were saying they had never felt more human. And they thanked this guy. Maxine Waters and the governor at that time, and I don't remember who it was before Gavin came, went through there and crushed those houses down. Crushed them. Took the little bulldozers in there and crushed them down because it violated some law they made. You have the right to make the law. The laws are supposed to be made based on society around the needs of the people. There is nothing in here about democracy because democracy is supposed to be what the majority wants. And the majority of Black people have moved away from the Democratic Party. And what is the Democratic Party doing? They're trying to shame you back.
Wag their finger at you.
Right. They're trying to shame you, trying to make you feel bad. You're a MAGA. Look at what he's doing now. Okay. Since nothing was being done, Trump said, you can't just let the people be unprotected. So that's why they came. The funny part is the Democratic Party went after that guy, Abreu Garcia. Oh my God, read his rap sheet. He was human trafficking. He had two incidents where he hurt his wife or girlfriend or whoever she was. And then he was selling drugs and guns. He was already on the radar. He had been in this country. Here's my thing. You've been in the country 14 years and you haven't applied for citizenship? Because,
And that,
hold on
that
before you even get to that. Go and look at what the Democratic Party did. You have to have a temporary waiver. Go and look at most of the waivers that were given were the PB1, temporary waiver from being paroled from prison. This wasn't somebody seeking asylum. It wasn't because they're coming from a place where they're being bombed. The Democratic Party was so proud of the fact that most of the people were coming here on this waiver. Even your ICE people had pictures showing these guys coming up to the wall and dropping babies, newborn babies, over the wall. The wall is 20 feet tall, dropping them over on the ground and another person picking them up and heading out with them. These children are undocumented. They're not coming with family. They have built tunnels under the wall, 100 to 200 feet into America. These are not Somebody who it's not like the Hootentots and the Hottentots where they were killing each other, the Houthis and the Tutsis, and people were begging to come to America for asylum. And America took them in under a special visa. The PB visas for people who were paroled. And that was what they were looking for. Why? Drug use was going down. All the things that needed to go down were going down. This is even before Trump got into office. The mindset of a lot of people was that I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be caught up in this. I don't want this. I don't want that. Okay. Trump came in and supported all the undercover work trying to get these children from not being trafficked. When Trump took office the first time, Obama had almost 1,700 children still locked away. Trump came in and said, let's find these children's families. And the children in which he could find real families in which they could prove this, this here's my granddaughter, or this is my niece, or, they could absolutely prove those children went back with them. If you are trying to have the New World Order agenda, you must reduce your population. You tried it with COVID, it didn't work. Kennedy came in and got rid of dyes. I know everybody's having a moment about that. But I have an autistic grandson because he got a shot. He's 20 years old now, but he got a shot. He was bright on point and he went boom, just like that in a month. So don't tell me about that.
Let me ask you, and this is for the person that really don't understand, like, and then they hear it and they be like, well, I don't understand the whole immigration thing with ICE and this, that, and the third. And you're painting a picture, and the picture is true, of understanding what's going on at the border and understanding that some of these countries in Central America are literally letting out their prisoners to get the stipulation of getting an early release would be, we're going to facilitate you going to America, going to the United States and getting out. You got 25 years, you got 10 years for all these heinous crimes. And in order for you to get released, you're not going to be with your family. We're going to send you to the United States. And the president, one of the things that he did when he first got inaugurated was he made an executive order and made the cartels
Mhm,
uh, terrorist.
mhm,
And a lot of people didn't understand why they did that. What they was going on. They think cartels, the first thing they think is fentanyl, cocaine, marijuana, and not understand that one of the things with any criminal organization is that you sell whatever you can sell that's going to make you money. One of the things that you discussed, which is prevalent definitely on that southern border, is people. People are being sold,
mhm,
namely children, and you see the influx of kids facilitated to come across the border.
mhm.
Basically, people putting young kids over across fences, gates, and so forth and so on. When we talk about how the impact of this, and be like, well, what Trump is doing is so harsh, and we make it about Trump, and he's this evil being, and he's just the enemy. Explain how people don't realize some of the policies that he has came with do appear harsh in nature, but it's to get control of the criminal open activity that's going on.
Okay. CIA didn't always exist. Please go back and read the history on the CIA. Courtesy of the CIA, you have drugs. First time black people even saw coke came out of the hands of the CIA. Meth came out of their hands. Pharmaceutical companies in America. Well, you don't know. You have to go back and read everything about America. But you know, Kellogg, Hershey, all these wonderful companies. Coca Cola. Your Coca Cola was made with cocaine. So was Pepsi. Kellogg thought that if you gave people brand cereal, it would help them not be mentally ill. He was on to something. Him and his brother fought tooth and nail. His brother was a great lawyer, did a lot of stuff, but the family dynamics was horrible. But the brother was not above board and doing some unscrupulous things. The same thing with the oil family. So these families came together and the CIA sprung up out of that. When Shirley Chisholm and a couple of other black congresspeople spoke about what they knew and how the drug cartel, this was under the Reagan administration, Cynthia McKinney, when she spoke on it, and she was a hard-hitting woman, politician, black lady. She got to breaking it down like we see Patel doing it and Pam Bondi doing it. It was her, Shirley Chisholm, and some other people that were doing it. And I mean, they were coming. And they could say, well, the director of the CIA was the Bush man, the father to George Bush, the senior. He left there and went to FBI and then became president. Okay, so they were not above board. The Taliban, the Taliban, the Taliban were mostly, they had their own political agenda, but their biggest thing was that Russia was cutting an oil line through the land where they did their farming. Now they're not farmers like we know farmers here in America. They were mostly herders, that kind of thing. America was against Russia, so they went over there and helped Ayatollah Khomeini. Read about him, get his stuff together, and they taught his people how to become a small militia. CIA taught the cartels how to go from being a gang to a small militia. Go and read the Iran-Contra affair. See how they took drugs, bought guns, and gave it to the Taliban, the people in Afghanistan. And you will understand that when I tell you that the corruption is deep, it's deep. The mere fact that what you're seeing are rats running from a sinking ship. And here's the parable. Trump is at the top of the ship. Everybody underneath him knows their job, and their job is to go through that ship and go through every nook and cranny and crevice and weed out the rats. Because everybody on the ship is being sick. They're getting the plague. So you got to root it all out. With Trump being at the head, he's rooting everything out. That's why you had Doge. You do not hear one Democrat complain about the fact that you could not pass, that the Government Accounting Office, the GAO, couldn't get, for the last 7 years, could not get an audit on any of the agencies within the United States government. They couldn't pass an audit. Trump came through and said, we're going to do an audit. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. And what he did was that he cut off their biggest funding source, and that was USAID. There was no National Association of Education. When I graduated out of high school, it didn't exist. It didn't come into existence until the year before I started working for NASA.
So let me ask you,
Hmm.
five no damn, it's June already.
Hmm.
8 months ago.
Hmm.
8 months ago, had Vice President Harris became the president, where will we be now?
You are already under martial law, and most people don't realize that. Ever since 9/11, you went under martial law. The problem is that not enough people went to the place of being super afraid and demanding the government. And this is one thing I have to say. I love, I love my, as they say, the redneck white boys. I love them because they question everything. What do you mean? What do you mean I got to be under martial law? No, I'm not doing that. I love that about them. I'm not giving up my gun. No, I love that about them. I stand with them toe to toe on that because by them not breaking down, getting scared, and giving up their weapons, America knew they couldn't come in here and take over the way they did, the way the Chinese government did in China, or the Japanese government did with the people of Japan. Or look at, what's Jim Kung, whatever how you say his name, over there in North Korea. We won't see that here. But you keep chipping away. That's the whole purpose of George Soros. USA USAID was his biggest funding source. And when that was cut off at the knees, he's looking somewhere else. They're trying to create the oligarchy. They're trying to create a scenario where they wear you down with unnecessary stuff. Unnecessary stuff. Because they need fear in order for them to do their agenda. When they stopped with the aborting of babies, and I'm laughing because all of the states except for those hardcore states in the South, I think it was only like two or three, the vast majority of them had a clause called viability. And it's usually 12 weeks, 3 months. And after that, then, you got to go through hell or high water. But they had the viability clause. And they definitely had a clause for incest, where they can remove the child from the mother um, for the reasons of incest. So it has always been there. Go back and read Roe versus Wade, and you'll see that that young woman, she wasn't even pregnant at the time all this happened. She had already had her child, and then the other child was already aborted. But she was used. She was manipulated and used. Because think about it. Where do you see Planned Parenthood? It's always in marginalized communities, poor white women and black communities. Now to be in the Hispanic communities. We can't have black and brown babies. And you're going to think it's all because of color. No, it's because you have the ability to vibrate to a frequency.
Or would they consider white trash?
Oh, okay. But it's because you have the ability to vibrate to a frequency that the oligarchy can't get to. And they don't ever want you to be that way. Okay. Because when they read the books, now look, these are the people who went into all of these temples and got all of these books. Okay. And even if you just have the King James Version, go and read the book of Revelation. They tell you what God looked like. He had skin was burnt to bronze. He had woolly hair. Okay. Eyes red. You know how
So
we
let
get
me
angry.
let me ask you
Hmm.
before we close, and this is a very interesting conversation. I must say that I think that we'll probably continue this conversation uh, later. Let
Okay.
me ask you a question before we close.
Hmm.
What, because you've witnessed the genesis of a protest, a peaceful protest that
Mhm.
went the other way.
Mhm.
When you look at California from a distance and you see the news reports, and I know that you give us a like I said, you give us a very unique perspective. Um, do you what do you see happening going forward?
Gavin Newsom has been talking with the people who are making smart cities. Please do not move into a smart city. You will have to be chipped, and I'm not playing. He is trying to put in place the smart city. Remember now, before the fires in Hawaii, you had the fire in Napa Valley. Same type of thing. They wouldn't even let the reporters go in because when they went in, and you can see houses are burnt to absolutely ash, but the foliage around it wasn't burned at all. How? And many of the people who were living there were saying it was the craziest thing. We would see these lights, these red lights coming out of the sky, and then places would catch on fire. And the reporters that were able to get in, they weren't your mainstream legacy media. They were, people who were learning to be on TikTok and YouTube and that kind of stuff. And they were putting it up, but it never stayed up because, Google's controlled by the oligarchy. What they want now is for you to have discontinuity. They want to make sure that you're totally disconnected from the information that may be coming out of the current administration office, as opposed to what you're going to see on legacy media. Nobody on legacy media is talking about the fact that Letitia James, remember her? She was the one that went after Trump, claiming he was doing all this stuff with Mar-a-Lago. And it turned out that oh, from 1982 until just recently, she had a history of fraudulent real estate deals. They're talking about that. Not talking about it. They're presenting the data, the documents showing where she and her dad bought a piece of property. She mislabeled it as being 3 units and when it was 5. She put her dad down as her husband and not her dad. Okay. She's an attorney. Then you can go and look at, the stuff that was happening with my girl, Stacey Abrams. She got caught up in that situation. They're trying to make, the system wants to play on your emotion. They want you to take a position. I'm going to stand for that black woman. Jasmine Crockett. And the sad part is that Maxine Waters, Jasmine Crockett, are from St. Louis.
They're from the soil. They from where you from.
And the mere fact that you can look at this woman, she's only 10 years older than me, Maxine. And Jasmine Crockett is 44. Please tell me how a person whose salary is $174,000 a year, and she's a state representative, that position is only held for 2 years, and her net worth is $9 million. Please tell me. I'm listening. Okay. We saw this over and over and over and over again. And our black people opened our eyes and went like, mm-mm, mm-mm. Trump opened doors for us. Many of you may not remember, or you were very young, but Don King became a boxing promoter. Black guy, wild spiky hair on his head, all gray and mingled gray and white. Okay, very boisterous, very loud. He came in and took the majority of the black boxers away from the white industry. that had them, because the black boxers, even though they were, the purse money might have been high, they weren't getting the purse. And he found a way to get them to come up under him. But he had no arena because he had to pay arena fees for them to fight in the arena. Somebody told him, go on and talk to Trump. He wouldn't talk to Trump. Trump said, I don't have money for an arena and I'm not interested in buying an arena, but you can box in all of my casinos.
I don't think most people, and it's unfortunate, a lot of people understand that boxing promotion, when you need money, you need resources, and the effect. And one day we'll probably in the future, because I know Don King has been sick.
Mhm.
Uh, I have a personal friend that worked with him, and how hard it was for a black man to get into that arena, and
Mhm.
why he was considered one of the foremost people to get in the arena. Most people said, "Oh, Don King did this; he did all this harm," but in all actuality, he got into what we would call a rigged game,
Yeah, it's
and
always rigged. Mhm.
he basically was facilitated, got looked out for by people like President Trump.
Mhm.
Uh, Sister Azima,
Mhm.
great conversation. Great
Thank you.
conversation. I really look forward to understanding what's going to transpire. I'm quite sure, and as of right now, we know that Gavin Newsom is suing the Trump administration. He actually asked the judge to block Trump from being able to have National Guard and the Marines there. The
Mhm.
judge the judge denied it, so
Mhm.
they're there.
Mhm.
And going forward, like I said, unless you've been, and I don't want to say that you have to go through a protest to really know what you're talking about, but I will say that firsthand experience of a protest, a
Mhm.
situation of unrest.
Mhm.
Um, Sister Azima was around during a time where National Guard was deployed
Mhm.
throughout our cities.
Mhm.
When you see this, and I had one instance where I did some work during 9/11, um, and the National Guard was in New York City, and I was there. I had to do some work. I had to do some work basically 500 feet from ground zero. And
Mhm.
when you come across the National Guard, literally it's guys that are not from that area, and
Mhm.
they're just there to provide security.
Mhm.
Some people think the National Guard are there, and when you see these tanks and
Mhm.
Humvees, that they're
Mhm.
going to cause all this affliction. That isn't always the case.
Mhm.
That's not what they're there for. They're there to provide a parameter around the situation. So,
In
and
fact,
everybody's experience is different. Go ahead, Sister Azim.
FEMA was created to help the National Guard.
Mm,
The purpose of FEMA is that the minute we're under martial law or we are in a situation where it's all out riot, then FEMA is to come in and manage all of the resources in that area for that state
mm.
in order to bring everything under control. It was never meant to help you out in case of natural disaster. Never.
And you see it, for those that don't know, FEMA don't never, I know people are surprised, like every time something happened in natural disaster, FEMA, like Sister Azima said, FEMA don't have the resources. They don't have the money to do that. They don't. That's why you always hear, no matter what administration is in power, if a national disaster happens, FEMA say, we don't got the money. We don't got the money. We don't got the money. What happens is they turn it over to certain organizations, and organizations run point. I know during the hurricane situation down in North Carolina,
Mhm.
Duke Energy ran point.
Okay.
Duke Energy ran point. And a lot of people don't understand that Duke Energy, basically a company that provides energy,
Mhm.
ran point for everything. Now, we could say, were they qualified to run point? That's up to you.
Hmm.
but know that this is what happens when a disaster happens. A
Right.
particular company will
Yeah.
run point. But
With our disaster here, when we had those two tornadoes that came down, FEMA's not here. What happened was that our governor met with the mayor, and they came up with a strategic plan, and they've pulled money from other things that can be available, and they're using it to help people rebuild. And the insurance companies, I've never seen so many insurance people out here in my life. And even for people who are underinsured or have no insurance, they're finding a way to make sure they have a home.
that's right,
And as far as me and my family, we went out there 2 weekends in a row, and we passed out tents and tarps and sleeping bags and food and clothing and water, a lot of things. But it has not stopped. And everybody's working together on this. So that's the way it has always been. But at that time, it was called civil air defense. And you had a person in every neighborhood. In your block, you had a block unit person, a block unit leader, and they knew exactly where all the resources were, how to get people whatever they needed. And that's how we did it when we had other tornadoes that were severe. And this is not our first severe tornado. We had one in 56, 59, 63, in the 70s. So this is not our first catastrophic situation like this. Everybody's like, "Oh, it's the first." No, it's the first because they were born after a major tornado. But no, we've always been able to do that, and that's the way it has always been across the United States of America. It has
with
always been.
that,
Mhm.
and it's very important that we know what happens. Office of Emergency Management, like since Azim was bringing up stuff that I can remember just offhand, and understanding when in your locality, and this is important. Why I know a lot of people say, "Well, I'm not into politics." Well, I'm gonna just say this: politics are into you.
Mhm.
But anyway, before we while we close out, appreciate Sister Azima for joining us
Thank
every
you.
Tuesday. Appreciate it. Us her allowing um she's giving us a piece of history. And this is important that we understand what goes on during these protests, what goes on and behind the scenes, what goes on and being able to identify outside adjectives, agitators and how they can literally hijack the purpose and cause and us not being at ground zero in California and understanding what's going on and understanding that ICE has a job to do and they're
Mhm.
going to do their job.
Mhm.
Um, don't allow yourself to get caught up with this politically because one thing that I don't think a lot of people realize is that Tom Homan, and this is something that most people don't speak about. Tom Homan, who is the head of ICE and running the show, he's the same man that was running the show during President Obama's administration.
Correct.
So he is not about the politics of it. He's
Mhm.
there to do a job. President Trump got him to do a job because he was very effective in doing his job for President Obama. Some people think, oh, this guy, he just jumped on the scene. This is one of Trump's henchmen, so
Nope.
to say. No, he's not.
Nope.
He's there to do a job, and he's going to do a job. I'll just say this that a lot of us knew that uh, this immigration thing, this ICE thing was coming. This
Mhm.
was part of one of the things that Trump ran on.
Mhm.
And sometimes we need to just get out the way. Definitely the things that don't openly affect us. Some of the people have said, oh, as black people in this country, as melanated people in this country, we need to do something. We need to say something because we next. Well, I'm just going to speak on myself. When have we not been on deck?
Thank you.
So with that, remember, like, share, subscribe. I appreciate everybody for joining the show. Um, like I said, most of you guys in the chat don't realize that you guys make this conversation worth it. Man, Sister Azim and myself, we really appreciate you guys and look forward to seeing you guys next time. Take care. Have a great day.
What have you done for me lately? It's coons. What have y'all done for us lately? And if there's no answer, the only thing we owe them